So welcome to the walkthrough for the Edexcel Higher. It's the GCSE paper 2 of 2 and it's from the June or summer, whatever you want to call it, 2018. So let's have a bash. Formula page, but on we go with question 1A. So make A the subject, always leave the A term alone. Deal with everything else that's on the same side. So add a BD to both sides will earn you your first mark, and to isolate A on his own, you'll need to divide both sides by whatever's next to it. In this case, it's a C. So I am making a right pig's ear of that. So it's M plus BD. That's a bit better. All over C. On to inequalities. Now, as I do this, just treat it like an equal sign. If you want to work in decimals at the end, feel free. But you add 4 to both sides and divide both sides by 5. 8.6 or 43 over 5. Entirely your choice. Part C, one of them confusing looking factorisings. Doing one thing at a time. Set the brackets up, give yourself plenty of room and do the numbers first. They're both in the 6 times table. 6 threes are 18. 6 times minus 2 gives you the minus 12. You've dealt with the numbers. Now move on to the e's. E squared, E cubed. They've got E squared in common, E times E. The first term has no more E's. The second term has 1 left over. On the F's, don't forget when there's no power, there's a 1. So they've got F to the power of 1 in common. First term has 2 more required. So always worth, particularly when you're revising, check your answer by expanding, because it's very easy to make a very small mistake there. And it's always a great start to get full marks on page 1. Question 2, a few ways you can go about this one. If you want to find, because 2 plus 6 plus 7, if you want to find 2/15 of and 7/15 of, that's the way to go about it if you don't spot the shortcut. So that's 460 and that's 1610, and difference means subtract. So 1610 take away 460, 1150. The shortcut was to say that there were 5 shares difference, which turns out to be a third. So there was a quicker way, but who cares? It's 3 marks. Nothing wrong with the long way there. It didn't take too long. Number 3, one of them old wordy ones with multiplies. At the end of the day, the key bit is after the increase, they are both paid the same. So top line, 20,000, given an increase of 1.08 is your multiplier. So we get 21,600 rupees. Both people get the same. So how much did Jamuna put in? She's paid 19,200 rupees each month. How much? Work at the percentage increase. So this 19,200 multiplied by something must give 21,600. So divide both sides by 19,200 and you'll get 1.125. But that's not your answer, because that's your multiplier. It's not a percentage. Your percentage is what comes after the decimal point. There are some people I bet who times it by 100 and they'll end up with 112.5%. But as long as you've got 12.5% as the increase, no one cares how you got there. Number 4 is a show of fractions question. In other words, put your calc away and get on with it. So And whenever I'm adding or subtracting fractions, I don't like to do 3 take away 1 and all that malarkey. When you're revising, get top heavy. Not a fan of shortcuts, because who says the shortcut's going to work for your next exam? Make it top heavy, so keep the denominators the same, the 7 and the 8. Change the numerators. I always do big times bottom plus top, so 3 7s, 21 plus the 4. 1 8s are 8 plus the 5. Now you can focus on making them into 56ths. So times the bottom by 8, times the top by 8, times the bottom by 7. Do the same. That's not 15, Al. 1 sec. 1 8s are 8 plus 5. I'm sure people were getting stressed at that. Times by 7. 13 times 7. 91. Now you can just subtract the numerators. There's 109 left, but you might be able to tell that from the question. And all you need to do is wrap it up nicely. And that will do the job. That's enough working out. Don't need to show any more than that. Number 5, I'd argue, is quite a simple circle theorem with a bit of angles. As always, with these wordy or give reasons, I've written it out as an examiner would like to see it. So if you do want to see it exactly written out perfectly, without wanting to brag too much, then feel free to go to my worked answers, but I'll just talk you through it here. So several ways, that 18, if you've got the radius, that makes that 18 inside as well, because it's an isosceles triangle, and the base angles of an isosceles are equal. You've also got the fact that QT is a tangent, and a tangent meets the radius at a perpendicular. In other words, it's a right angle. So the angle PQT is going to be 90 minus the 18 to give you the 72. On we go. So we've got curved surface area. Now don't forget, when you peel the label off a tin of beans or soup or whatever, the shape of the curved surface area is nothing more than a rectangle. This rectangle, albeit wonky rectangle's height, is 1.6, and the distance along its length refers to the length of the circumference. In other words, 2 times pi times the radius. So to work out the curved surface area, it really is just the area of a rectangle. On your calc, get those things times 2 times pi times the radius times 1.6. I get 5.6, 297-ish, but it wants 3 sig figs, so 5.63. Now I'll scroll down, even though we're making them disappear a little bit, doesn't really matter. They are mathematically similar. Alright, the height of cylinder B is 0.6. So we can say that the scale factor is 0.6 over 1.6. You could have it upside down, because don't forget, when you've got scale factor, you could be looking from A to B or B to A. Doesn't matter. Alright, no one really cares. So in this case, 3/8 is what your calculator spits out. That's my multiplier going from big to small. So work out the radius of cylinder B. The radius of the larger cylinder is 0.56. That needs times in by my scale factor. Calculator says 21/100ths, but because the question was in decimals, I'll give my answer in decimals. Number 7, one of them hidden mean questions. So there's 28. Top one tells us nothing. Second line tells us there are 60 students. That's always important. The mean score for all the students in both classes is 72.6. Job 1, get them multiplied, because that will tell you the total scores across the classes. 4,356. The mean score for students in Class A, where there are 28 students, is 75. Those two multiplied gives you 2,100, and if you subtract them, you'll get the total for Class B, 2,256. Final stage, in Class B, there's 32 students. We divide it by 32 to get the average of 70.5. Next bit, easy when you suss it out, in my opinion. So the idea is, if you look at just the information from Class A, the lowest is 39, the range is 57, so their highest is 96. So we've got lowest and highest. And in Class B, lowest of 33, range of 60, so highest of 93. Find the range for all the students, so that is biggest, take away smallest. So 96 minus 33 gives us 63. Number 8, as bog standard a SOHCAHTOA question as you're ever going to get. So as always, get your labels. We want the hypotenuse. The adjacent is useful. The opposite is useless. So this is a HA question. We want the hypotenuse. It's A over H, so it's adjacent divides A over C, sorry. So it's 12.6 over cos of the angle 52. And I get, 20.465. And so on. 3 sig figs, 20.5 it is. Gone from bog standard SOHCAHTOA to as bog standard a simultaneous equations as you're likely to get. Top equation, I'm going to times it by 5. Obviously, you could times it by 7. I'm not going to. I'm going to go for the 5 route. So we get 5x's added to 5y's equals 75. Can now reject that first one. Not going to look at that. The numbers in front of the y's are -5 and +5. Same signs subtract, so different signs add. So we get 78 for the numbers, 12x for the x's. So to find x, 78 divided by 12, we get a 6.5. And we find y because the top line is dead easy. These two answers must add together to make 15, so y's got to be 8.5. Number 10, laws of indices. These always come up. So the clue there is write everything as a power of 2. So 8 on the top is 2 cubed over 2 to the power of 7. Over means divide. And when you divide, you subtract the powers. All right. Now be careful. It doesn't want the answer 2 to the -4, although that is correct. It just wants the value of n, -4. Do take care. Part B, it's still laws of indices, but don't forget BIDMAS always exists. Do the brackets first. So we've got power to a power. So you multiply the powers, we get -24. And we're multiplying by 13 to the power of 5. And multiply means add the powers. So it's 13 to the power of -19. Onwards. Number 11, so we've got solid metal sphere. So at this point, do refer back to your formula booklet, because the volume of a sphere is 4/3 times by pi times by the radius cubed, and that's your volume. Now your calc will spit out 9 pi over 2. You can obviously work in the decimals if you wanted to. Now, as soon as it mentions density, you need to make sure you're using your DMV triangle. Work out the density. Density is mass, which they tell us is 109.6, divided by the volume, which is 9 pi over 2. Do take care with your calc. As long as you get 7.75, you've done it fine. You've done all right. On we go. Number 12. So a strange looking hexagon, but a hexagon nonetheless. So don't forget, the way you find out the total of the interior angles of a shape is subtract 2 from the number of sides and times it by 180. So that will give you these angles total 720 degrees. But if you want to work out the angles that they're asking around here, all right, you need another angle. Now you've got that angle, believe it or not, because of these parallel lines. Don't forget, when you've got parallel lines, whether you call them co-interior or whatever name you've got for them, I don't care, they add up to 180. So in there we can fill in 138. So grab your calculators. 720 minus 50 minus 96 minus 138 minus 144 minus 42 does give you 250. But again, don't celebrate. It's not the right answer. That's a reflex angle. It wants the obtuse angle. They will add up to 360. 110 is your final answer. Number 13, a treble probability tree, but they've drawn it for you, so no need to panic. So just take your time with these. All right, no need to rush. Firstly, the cards are not replaced, so they've got to be over 9. So that's your first thing. Lots of writing for these 2 marks, but so what? They're easy marks. So we started with 5 red. So if a red's been picked, there's 4 reds, the blues and the greens don't change. Middle batch, if a blue's been picked, the reds don't change, the blues reduce by 1, the greens stay at 1. And if a green's been picked, there are still 5 red cards, still 4 blue cards, and we don't have any green cards, making that branch impossible. But here we go. Work out the probability that Felix takes at least 1 blue card and no green card. So you've just got to look down each route. As you can see, at least 1 blue card, the only one down the top trio, is there. Because getting a red and a blue would fulfill what you're after. That's at least 1 blue and no green in sight. But so would this branch, because that's at least 1 blue and it's a red, not a green. You've also got the middle branch, because that would be 2 blue. And there are no more, because blue and green, well, we don't want the green, and then we don't want the green full stop down here. We want no green card. So it's pointless looking anywhere down the bottom. So it is just those 3 branches. So you need to work out 5/10 multiplied by 4/9, and the second branch is 4/10 times by 5/9, and the third branch is 4/10 times by 3/9, and your calc will spit out the simplified fraction of 26/45. The original, if you didn't cancel it down, it'd be 52/90, but I'm sure you're doing it on your calc. Number 14, as always, for accuracy purposes, I have cheated. I've copied it direct from my worked answers, because otherwise the accuracy of me with this, essentially a giant crayon, would be absolutely rubbish. But let's fill that table in first. So I would recommend you use your calculator, and whenever you substitute in x, stick some brackets in. So type it in as you see it, but when you replace x with a number, put brackets in, because the negatives in particular will be a pain. But let your calc do the rest. It'll follow BIDMAS perfectly, and off you go. So please make sure you do get -6, 4, 0, -2, and 4. Now let's move on to the graph. Now I've made it bigger than the original. I've dragged it down so you can't actually see the question. The question just says, on the grid, draw the graph of y equals, and so on. So as you can see, I've done an okay job, I would argue, at drawing that. Good luck to yourselves when you have a bash. Now on the next part, I'll need to show you a little bit of algebra, and then we'll come back to why I've drawn that line. So do notice they're asking you to solve that one, but that's not the one you've drawn. All right, the one that we've been given and the one that we've drawn are not the same. So they are related, though, in a kind of way. If you compare the graph that we've drawn, this is down here, 2x squared minus 3x plus 4, and I'm going to just say, whoa, it's not quite the same, but they're definitely similar. What's happened? Well, the x cubes are the same. The x squareds are the same. What's different? They've subtracted 2x. It's like they've gone from there to there, and they've subtracted 2x, but they've also gone from there to there and added 3. So there's the crux of this question. If you're trying to solve that, but you've actually drawn this, the solutions to the top line will be the solutions to the bottom line. You just need to draw the graph of y equals minus 2x plus 3. And that's why that straight line's on there. Because the graph of minus 2x plus 3 will have an intercept of 3 and a gradient of -2. So for every 1 unit across, you've got to go down 2, and so on. Or if you don't like the y equals mx plus c version, feel free to make your own table of values. Now, as you can see, there are 3 points of intersection. So do read them off carefully. So I got minus 0.8, kind of ish, just slightly under. I got also here, that's, you can just see it's bang on 0.5. And down here, my line's slightly off, I reckon, but never mind. That's 2.3. Now, believe it or not, I got them more or less spot on. The mark scheme allows, do make sure your original drawing is accurate. The mark scheme allows for this lower answer anything between minus 0.9 and minus 0.7. For the middle solution, anything from 0.4 to 0.7. And for the upper solution, anything from 2.1 to 2.4, all inclusive. All right, hope that made sense. On we go. Slightly easier lower bound question. So whether you're faced with an easy bounds or a hard bounds question, take the numbers that have been rounded, go up and down. You go up and down by half the rounding amount. So second decimal, 2 decimal places means you must go into the third decimal place. So 8.315, 8.305, 0.655, 0.645, and it wants the lower bound. It wants the smallest possible value of E take away F. And the way we can make this the smallest possible is start with the smallest possible answer. That's 8.305. That's the smallest value for E. And take away the biggest possible value of F. You can. And that'll give you your lower bound, 7.65. Onwards. So a strange proportion question, because it's not giving you the old R is 4 when T is 6 sort of thing. You actually need to read that from the graph. So as you can tell, there are some other coordinates you could pick, but that gives you 3.5. So as you can see, you can read from the graph that when T equals 2, R equals 10. That's helpful. And as I say, the other useful point you probably could have picked is that one, but that does have a decimal. Why bother? I do think 210 is the easiest. So you're told right at the top, R is proportional to T squared. So we stick these in. Replace R with 10. Replace T with 2. And bosh, you've got your K. K is 10 over 4. In other words, K is 2.5. And you'd get that from there anyway. But there you go. And there we go. We've got the formula. R will equal K, which we now know, multiplied by T squared. On we go to part B. So, given also, so it's like a connected proportion. This is now more or less saying to you, R is inversely proportional to 8/5 and so on. It says show that T is inversely proportional. Well, we've had an equation from the previous bit. We can replace R with 8 over 5x. And let's just tidy this up. 2.5 is 5 over 2. I'm going to get rid of the bottoms, multiply both sides, so I get 16 equals 25 xt squared. Show that t is inversely proportional to root x. In other words, rearrange so it's t equals. So I actually didn't need to remove the x, but there you go. So let's divide both sides by 25x. And there we go. When you square root both sides, you can square root the top. That's a 4. Square root the bottom. That's a 5. But square root the x. And that's it, because that's what inverse proportion is. Inverse proportion to root x means something over root x, in this case 0.8. On we go. So some differentiation, some bring the power down malarkey. So it just wants you to differentiate. So here, bring the power down, take 1 off the power. Second term, bring the power down, so minus 2 times 2. Take 1 off the power, so it becomes a 1. Don't need to write that. And when you differentiate minus 15x, you get minus 15. And numbers, when they're differentiated, they disappear. So it says, we'll keep that on screen, work out the range of values when it has a negative gradient. Well, don't forget what dy by dx means. Dy by dx is known as your gradient function. So to have a negative gradient, it means your gradient function would need to be negative. And hey presto, it might not have looked like it, but it was a differentiation question that becomes solving an inequality. So factorize all formula, and you're entirely your choice. AC method if you prefer it, but when there's prime numbers here and small numbers here, I'm not that fussed. I do it by just guesswork, really. So it's not going to be 15 and 1, so it's got to be 5 and 3. The only question is where, and you just play around with them in your head, because 5 times x minus 9x gives you the minus 4x in the middle. So these don't give you the solutions, don't forget, they give you the critical values. So one of your critical values is minus 5/3. The other critical value is 3. It's a positive x squared curve. So you're wanting to write the inequality of where is the curve below 0, and it's between these values. So 3 is the upper limit, minus 5/3 is hell of a 3. Minus 5/3 is the lower limit. On we go. So question 18, triangle's got 3 sides, 8, 10 and 14. So this is that logic. Don't forget, like the hypotenuse is opposite a 90-degree angle. It's also 90 degrees because that's the largest possible you can have in a right-angled triangle. You can't have another angle bigger than 90. So the logic is the longest side is opposite the largest angle. So however you draw this, no one cares. There's my longest side, there's my middle side, there's my shortest side. That's the angle I am after. So however you draw it, doesn't matter whether it's to scale or not. I wouldn't bother drawing one to scale. Don't get a ruler out, not worth it. You just need to realise that this is your cosine rule. A squared, because you don't have, reason why it's not the sine rule, don't forget, is you don't have an angle and an opposite side. So you have to go for the cosine rule, minus 2bc cos A, can't bother writing, but you need to rejig it. So I'm sure you'll have seen the rearranged form. You need to add that to both sides, and it's b squared plus c squared minus a squared all over 2bc. And there we go. So the labels you give are always A and A. Go to the important things, B and C. Doesn't matter which way round they are. So stick it all in your calculator. So what you want to be doing is inverse cos. Stick it all in your calc. B squared, so 64 plus 100. Take away 14 squared is 196. All over 2bc is 160. When you've stuck that in your calc, you should get minus a fifth, or minus 0.2. And when you press that in your calc, or if you did it straight there to one decimal place, answer of 101.5. Next. So question 19, I'm just going to add a little line in here from D to B, for a simple reason that work out the size of the angle between BE, that's this line there, and the plane. So it's always about like where it would cast a shadow. So this, if we're going to work out that angle, the logic you've got to follow through is we need two sides of that triangle. Good news is you've already got one of them. D to E is the same as A to F. So the height of your triangle is 10. What you don't have is that. And I've picked that out because E to B would be more tricky to find. There'd be more steps to follow. You can find D to B because it's the hypotenuse of the rectangular floor of which we know its length and width. So first job, find the length D to B. We will be adding 24 squared and 8 squared. My calc said 8 root 10, kept it in third form instead of decimals. And it's never a bad idea to draw out the triangle just in case you pick the wrong bit of SOHCAHTOA. So the vertical side, the ED, was 10. The DB side is 8 root 10. And to find that angle, it's the hypotenuse, which is useless. So it's a TOA question. So you need to press inverse tan, and it's O over A, opposite, divided by adjacent. Again, one decimal place. Stick it in your calc. I get what? 21.568-ish. In other words, 21.6. Number 20, a histogram question which doesn't give you any details on the frequency density. So the easiest way to go about this is just to think of it as number of squares. That's it. Just number of squares. So 6 of these babies were less than 2.5. That's that bar there. And greater than 4. That's that bar there. So let's consider how many squares 6 babies are worth on the histogram. So zoom in if you need to. Look at your own paper. Either count them up or just do length times width. So its width is 5. Its height is 4. That's 20 squares. And this has a width of 10 squares, a height of 1. So 6 babies are worth 30 squares, but probably more importantly, that means one baby accounts for 5 squares. So it now says work out the number of babies in the other bars, basically. So our job now, find out how many squares. So same process really. This first bar, second bar, third and fourth. So bar 1 is 5 by 4. So that's 20 squares. Be careful here, it's not 5, it's 4. Alright, it's 3 to 3.4 wide, and it's 5, 10, 15, 20 high. So it's 80 squares. The third bar is 2 by 25, so that's 50 squares. And the fourth and final bar has another width of 4, a height of 15, so that's 60. So the middle bars have a total of 212 squares. Well, we know that 5 squares represents a baby, so we take the 210 and divide it by 5, and 42 is your bang on answer. 21, some surds, but it's with all its show stuff, its meaning. Put your calc away, don't be daft. So, root of 45, the biggest square number that goes into 45 is 9. The biggest square number that goes into 20 is 4. And these are what simplify, because without a calc, you know what the root of 9 is. You know what the root of 4 is. And you're there, aren't you? But it is worth tidying it up, finishing it off. Part B, in a similar way. So we need to multiply top and bottom and change the sign in the middle. So on the top, we times everything by 2. So I get 2 root 3 plus 2. And on the bottom, you only need to do the outside loops the beginners and the enders. That's root 3 times root 3 and minus 1 times 1. Because the other two loops basically cancel each other out. So we end up on the bottom with 2. Make a check of the question because that's the form it wants it. Well, it's turned out nice, hasn't it? Because everything's even on the top and we've got a bottom for our denominator. We can halve everything. Root 3. I'll put the 1 first like I've been told to. And for part C, a very strange looking completing the square. Now don't get put off by that root. It's still exactly the same process. You open up your brackets, which are squared. You halve the number next to x. It's 3 root 2. That's all it is. Now that needs squaring and taking away. So if you do 3 root 2 times 3 root 2, it's 9 2's. So it's an 18 to take away. And you're there, aren't you? Because the bracket is done. And we simplify the end. So the plus b is minus 19. On we go. So I know some teachers for question 22 would do these as proportion. In other words, they'd write them as fractions. They'll be putting 7 over 9 and all that sort of malarkey. I prefer to do them as multiplication. First thing to note is, don't forget it's about intersecting chords. A radius is not a chord. You need to double the radius to get a chord. Because basically, what is a diameter? A diameter is a chord which goes through the centre of a circle. So we don't need to work with r here. We need to work with 2r. So be careful of that. So, first thing to look at is AC. So the idea is, again, because I do proportion, I do 7 times 4 equals, and the chord it intersects, as you can see, this bit here, that's 2r minus 2 multiplied by 2. As I say, there are some people who prefer to write them as fractions, but once you've got them as fractions, you've got to multiply through anyway, so I don't get it. So that's my starting point, and obviously we can tidy this up. 28 equals 2 lots of 2r, so 4r minus 4. Well, we can actually work out r then, can't we? The size of the radius. Add 4 to both sides and divide by 4. We get 8 for our radius. Well, we can now move on to the other two intersecting chords. Same process, but they've now got 3 numbers to be careful of. So in the first case, the 5 is outside, so it's 5 multiplied by 7 plus 4 plus 5, so that's 16, equals, and what we've got on the other one, we've got x, and it's multiplied. What's the total length of it all? Well, it's diameter plus x. In other words, x plus 16. You've now got enough to work on to find x, because this is a quadratic. What am I doing? Let's tidy it up. 5/16 are 80. That's x squared plus 16x. I'll save myself some room. I'll take 80 away from both sides. We now need to solve it. Now, because it says work out the value of x, it doesn't give you a clue really that doesn't factorise. All right. Sorry, you can factorise it, or is it 10, 8, and oh, it doesn't matter. I use the quadratic formula anyway, just in case it was wanting us to have some strange numbers, but it turns out to be quite a nice number. So use the quadratic formula, minus 16 plus or minus 16 squared plus 4ac, 4 times 1 times, it's a plus because it's minus times a minus, 320. Now, one of the answers you get is x equals minus 28. Okay, that's one of the answers that gets rejected because it's a negative length and we don't want that. But the other answer is a perfectly nice looking 4. On we go. So, final question. Again, flick back to the formula page. It does give you that the sum to n is n over 2. So that's the number of terms over 2 multiplied by 2 lots of the first term plus n minus 1 lots of the difference. Now, this is definitely one of those questions where it looks like you don't have enough numbers, but I would say crack on regardless. So let's not worry about the question. Let's worry about the top line first, the top sentence. It's saying to you the sum of the first 48 numbers is 4 times the sum of 36 numbers. Well, let's put those n's into that equation. So we get 48 over 2. We'll tidy that up in a bit. 2 lots of a, nothing we can do there. 48 subtract 1, so 47d is equal, so 4 lots of n is 144. Don't forget halved. And we've also got 2a and n minus 1 is 35d. Now, it looks like it's absolute gibberish. It's not, trust me. If we expand these brackets, because these cancel, and then you times the brackets out, it all looks a lot more friendly. 48a 1128d equals 144a plus 2520d. Let's make it equal to 0. Take away 48a from both sides. And this cancels down. Stick 96 over 1392 in your calculator as a fraction, and it will tell you it's 2 over 29. And that might look like it's not connected at all. Carry on regardless. Find the sum of the first 30 terms. Let's use this formula again. That would be 30 over 2, 15 in other words, and in the brackets 2a, n minus 1 is 30 minus 1. Hold on, they're the same. Look what they've gone and done. You end up with basically 15 times 0, because 2a plus 29d is 0, is 0. 15 times 0. What a bunch of jokers they are. The answer is 0. Obviously, it's guessable, so they wouldn't have given you any marks for a correct guess. I just guess 0 or 1 for something. Not going to give you anything for that. Heck of a correct question to finish off with. That intersecting chord one's quite tricky, as was there, but there's plenty of meat on the bone early on, plenty of big markers early on. Overall, a fair paper, and under 50 minutes for a 2-hour one, not bad. So I hope that's helped. I'll see you on the next one.